Good morning, everybody. It's a beautiful spring day here at Father Bill's shelter. And I know the governor and the speaker are going to be talking about a little bit of a major state initiative, which is going to assist Father Bill's with the next phase of their vision for the future of dealing with those folks that are down and out. And some of this relates to just the other side of this building. We'll be building a new police station pending the vote of the City Council on Monday night, which is going to lead to a lot of improvements in this area. So the city's fully committed, as we've been meeting with John and Father Bill's for some time and working those details out, and they'll be going across the street here. So we're proud to stand with them. I do want to acknowledge I have some city councilors here with me today who have been supportive. Ward 1 Councilor David McCarthy, Ward 2 Councilor Anthony Andronico, Councilor at Large Noel DeBona, and who am I missing? Brian Palmucci. Where's Brian? There you are. Ward 4 Councilor Brian Palmucci. And they've been a partner in every aspect of this. The Affordable Housing Trust Fund, Quincy's been part of it. Planning Director Jim Fatsis is with us. I did want to give a shout out to a former city councilor, Joe Finn, who, when I first met Joe, was the director of Father Bill's. Joe was very effective in his role. And he continues to be a tremendous advocate for these issues statewide in the Commonwealth, Joe. So appreciate your presence here as well. Let me just say this, we're in for those who are Christian, Ramadan's a couple of weeks away, Passover was last weekend. For us Christians, this week is Holy Week. And Easter and springtime is really all about new beginnings. And this here today, what we're talking about is really new beginnings for Father Bill's, the staff, but certainly the recipients of the good care that goes on here. So I'm proud to be here. I'm proud to stand with Speaker Mariano and Governor Baker, Lieutenant Governor, Senator Keenan, and our delegation from our State House. And I couldn't say enough about the partnership that we've enjoyed with Governor Baker, with the new Speaker, in all things Quincy. From my perspective, you have a bigger perspective, both of you, but my perspective, Quincy, have been tremendous partners. And I could go on and on about that with this governor. He's been absolutely amazing, rolls up his sleeve, just wants to get the job done, wants to attack the problem, get it fixed. And this is another opportunity for him to do that. So with that, His Excellency, the Governor of the Commonwealth, Charlie Baker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And let me just say that I'm thrilled to be back in Quincy. I know I speak for the Lieutenant Governor when I say that as well. And to Joe Finn, I just want to say, Joe, I've known you for, let's just say, a very long time. And you and I have worked on many, many issues around housing, and I especially appreciate the advice and the counsel and the advocacy that you offered us as an administration throughout the course of this pandemic. I take a certain amount of satisfaction in the fact that because of the guidance and the advice we got from our colleagues in the legislature, from our colleagues in municipal government, and from many of the folks in the housing community, we have been able, over the course of this very difficult year, to keep people home. And I think in many ways that was a tribute to the work that was done by the legislature, a lot of the guidance and advice we got from folks like you, the eviction diversion program we put in place earlier this year, the moratorium that was in place before that. And the very good news on that one is the last round of federal funding included about $475 million in rental assistance, which we will be baking into our existing eviction diversion programming, which should mean that we'll continue to be able to help people stay home, despite the fact that we're still going to have to work our way through the end of this pandemic and out of it and into a recovery. But voices like yours have made a really big difference, and we appreciate that, even when you were yelling at me. And I also want to say to John and the gang here at Father Bill's, it's great to be with you again. Your folks have been tremendous partners in so many ways and on so many occasions. And to Senator Keenan and to Representative Ayers, I just want to say to you both, on many issues, and especially on addiction, you've been tremendous partners as well. And it's good to see you, Representative Chen, as well. And to the council, I would just say, as a former select board member, and my colleague, the Lieutenant Governor, also a former select board member, we know how hard it is to keep those executives in line. And we're thrilled that you folks have a chance to work with a guy like this one. He's very special. Today we're announcing about $20 million in housing support for a variety of programs around the Commonwealth, some of which Secretary Keneally will get into in a little more detail, but this one in particular is about a $4 million piece of the puzzle associated with this project that's going to be going up across the street. I do want to say that Quincy has always been a housing choice community since the beginning of our housing choice program. And that has made it possible for us to work with them on a variety of issues associated with growing our housing stock here in Massachusetts. The Lieutenant Governor and I worked extremely hard over the course of the last 4 years to create an operating model, a statutory framework that will make it possible for communities to grow our housing stock here in Massachusetts. Housing is expensive in Massachusetts. We all know that. But one of the reasons it's expensive is because we don't make enough of it, of any kind: senior housing, supportive housing, rental housing, workforce housing, affordable housing. The simple truth is, for the past 30 years or so, we've been building probably about half the supply we need to actually serve our population. And that housing choice legislation creates a statutory framework. The housing bond bill that was enacted by the legislature and we signed a couple of years ago gives us a ton of dry powder. And I really do hope coming out of the pandemic, one of the things we're able to do is put a lot of shovels in the ground all over the Commonwealth to create a lot of the housing capacity that we so desperately need here in Massachusetts. And the final thing I'll just say is, do you need to go anywhere?
There's a shutout.
Yeah. The final thing I'll say is how much we appreciate the partnerships we've had with so many of our colleagues on many issues associated with housing and housing stability throughout the course of this pandemic. It's been a ton of work, and people have done a lot of very special and very great work to help keep people home. And with that, I will turn it over to the Lieutenant Governor.
So it is still good morning, everyone. It's great to be here in Quincy with our friends and a lot of advocates from places around the Commonwealth around housing and housing choices and housing opportunities and housing stability. And it's very fitting that we are here in the city of Quincy. Mayor Koch and the councilors and this team have embraced housing as a key feature, whether it's housing, market rate housing in downtown to help populate the downtown with people that move around and consume services, or it's housing that we are focusing on here, which is supportive housing and offering affordable choices. You take, for instance, what's happening here at Father Bill's. We had a warm welcome from the guests inside who have enjoyed a lot of love and support, especially over this past year. And when you think about what John and his team have had to do in the shelter system to comply with COVID restrictions to make it safer for residents to live there, they've had to reduce the capacity here by 50%, as well as meet the needs for shelter requests in this community and across the state. But if and when, hopefully, the affordable housing is constructed nearby, some of these residents can then move into affordable options, and then this frees up more capacity within a shelter system to serve people with needs in that way. I also want to say thank you to Speaker Mariano, who's been a long-time supporter of Father Bill's, understanding how this model of housing is really key for communities like Quincy and others to embrace and include in the portfolio of housing choices available. We just want to thank you for your leadership, Speaker, and for long time standing by Father Bill's. Thank you to Senator Keenan, Representative Ayers, Representative Chan for your support over the course of the past couple of years as we have looked to have housing choice activated here in the Commonwealth. All of you were champions of that, and we appreciate your leadership. This is a great announcement today, and it allows us to spotlight a feature of housing that we offer here in the Commonwealth called supportive housing. Supportive housing is like one big hug around people who come into the shelter system, not just because they need shelter to have a roof over their head and to be warm and get a good meal, but to then be supported by all the other things that they need in order to be well and to be loved and to be literally supported, whether it's behavioral health or health care or child care needs or developing skills that could lead to a job and then more economic stability to their lives. All of that is part of the supportive model that we have here in the Commonwealth that we love so much. I've been able to come to these events every year, and I see some familiar faces that have participated in this event every year. Last year, obviously, we had to skip. In 2019, there was a snowstorm upon us, but we still got together to make the announcements because we know how important this is. At Father Bill's, we're announcing $4 million toward the construction of the new Housing Resource Center that will be built across the street, and John, who will speak to that more specifically. It's terrific. The new multi-use facility will incorporate approximately 100 shelter beds, on-site supportive services, as I referred to, like respite care, food preparation, dining, administrative offices, and a clinic. Again, thank you to John, but thank you for the City of Quincy for partnering and making a big investment in this project as well. Vote of the council needed for that and for really making this happen. In addition to these 100 shelter beds in Quincy, today's $13.3 million capital investment will lead to the production and preservation of 67 units of permanent supportive housing in our Commonwealth. We will also be supporting these units with 57 Massachusetts housing vouchers, which are a critical piece of how we support the housing development. Earlier this month, we celebrated the expansion also of the Mass Rental Voucher Program. That's also critically important. To provide a voucher to an individual that needs support could include victims of domestic violence, homeless families, and individuals needing shelter, and then helping them access permanent housing. Really important. Want to give a big shout out to Kate Racer and the DHCD team. We refer to her as Rockstar Racer in our camp. Thank you for all of your hard work. An additional $10 million is available for the permanent supportive housing through your organization. And there are a number of awards being made today. In Worcester at the South Middlesex Opportunity Council, 18 studio apartments for at-risk homeless individuals. In Alston, Brighton, another 14 units of supportive housing. And then the list goes on for Dorchester, as well as Amherst, Salem, and of course here in Quincy. So you can see that this is a model of housing that spans across our Commonwealth and provides meaningful opportunities for people to not only access shelter, but also access the support and love that they need to take those next steps in their own lives. Just thank you all for being here to mark this moment and to be able to highlight an important initiative of our administration with our colleagues in local and state government. With that, it's a great pleasure. It's my first time doing this to announce and introduce our partner in government, our Speaker of the House, Mariano.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. This brings back a lot of memories. I think it was about, and I can actually pinpoint the day I met Joe Finn. And it was right here, it was probably about 30 years ago, when Joe asked me to come down here and see Father Bill's. And he explained his theory of housing to me, and it began a relationship which we renewed every year until he left. And then John somehow found my address in my office, and he's been in there every year since. In the last couple of years, more than once a year. But I want to begin by saying thank you to the senator who's here, John Keenan, and the two reps, Representative Taki Chan and Representative Bruce Ayers, who constantly have been supportive of all the initiatives that the governor has come up with. All of these initiatives are worthwhile, very hard decisions that have to be made, choices that have to be made, and I thank the governor for being here today and announcing this in a project in our home city of Quincy. Extremely important to the city, important to all of us who live here. It has certainly been a benefit to the mayor, who has invested a lot of time and effort into the redevelopment of the downtown, and to be able to present a new facility, a bright and shiny facility for folks who are undergoing difficult circumstances in their lives is truly, truly a great, great mark on the city of Quincy. It shows that we care, that we're committed to helping those who need help. And I can't say enough about this project. It has been very close to my heart. I'm looking forward to being here for the groundbreaking when the new building construction begins on the new building. And I'm sure John will be in to see me a few times before that happens. So with that, I want to say thank you to the governor, the lieutenant governor, and for all the administrative folks who put these programs together and then make them happen. That is the key. We vote on a lot of things. Some of it we get to see realized in our own districts. Most of it we don't. So it is nice to know that there are people out there working across the Commonwealth for these worthwhile projects. So again, thank you. I didn't get the memo. I'm supposed to introduce Secretary Keneally, who's going to talk about some of the other projects.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The partnership between our administration and the legislature is so critical to our economic recovery and to solving our housing crisis. So very grateful for your collaboration and that of Senator Keenan, the new Senate Chair of Housing, the representatives as well. Great to see you all. Mr. Mayor, thanks for having us back to Quincy. I think the last time I was here for a housing event was October of 2019, which feels like a very, very long time ago. But we were here to highlight all you've done in housing, your leadership around housing production, and of course at that time to advocate for the passage of the housing choice legislation. So Quincy's been such a leader in housing, and of course we're now grateful that has now been passed into law. So I've got two other announcements today. One is around the designations of housing choice communities. And as the governor mentioned, Quincy's been a housing choice community for a very, very long time now. And I'm pleased to announce today that we have 8 new communities in the sort of class of 2021 for housing choice. And those are Great Barrington, Holliston, Lincoln, Lynn, Millbury, Walpole, and Wellesley. And then we are redesignating 6 communities: Ayer, Burlington, Franklin, Hingham, Newton, and Rentham. Combined, these communities have permitted hundreds of new housing units. They've implemented a variety of other best practices in housing and been really impressive leaders, as has Quincy been, in housing production across the state. So congratulations to those communities for their impressive efforts. We now have 78 housing choice communities across Massachusetts. If you're a housing choice community, you're eligible for housing choice capital grants. And that's the second part of our announcement today around the Housing Choice Initiative. $5 million in housing choice community capital grants and small town grants to 28 cities and towns. I'm not going to read them all, obviously, but here are some great examples of how these awards will have an impact on their communities. So here in Quincy, the Housing Choice Grant funding will cover portions of design and engineering services for the Housing Resource Center. For Littleton and Northampton, their grants will allow them to increase development capacity by investing in infrastructure and road repairs. And on the Vineyard, both Oak Bluffs and West Tisbury will use grant funding for infrastructure that will result in a number of new affordable rental units. So I'm so pleased we can provide this targeted funding to small towns and housing choice communities. They're all working hard to make their community a place where families and residents can put down roots. I feel very privileged to be part of a great and talented team with an HED and DHCD. I want to also say an acknowledgement and hi to Kate Racer. Haven't seen Kate in a year in person, so good to see you, Kate. And Roger Herzog from CDAC, also a really important partner in this work. So congratulations to all the awardees. And with that, I think you turn it over to Senator Keenan.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, Mr. Speaker. It's great to see you here and to be able to call you Mr. Speaker, Mayor, my great colleagues in the legislature, Representative Chan, Representative Ayers, to John Yaswinski, and of course to the Governor and Lieutenant Governor. Thank you all for being here today, and I bring you the greetings of the Massachusetts State Senate. On a day like today, you realize that words, or every day you realize that words have meaning. And when you think of the words that we use as we try to address our housing issue, we talk about homeless shelters. They play an important role, an incredibly important role in what we do. But think of those words, homeless, a shelter. And now think about what comes next, right across the street, housing resources, and even more so, supportive housing, from homeless shelters to supportive housing. It's not just the words, but it's also what's behind those words and what's behind and what goes on behind the walls of those type of facilities. The Lieutenant Governor mentioned supportive housing. It's like a hug, and it really is. And when you look at what goes on behind the walls of these places, you hear the stories, and we heard one just moments ago about how the programs offered here at Father Bill's, programs that will be even greater across the street, but how those programs save lives. We heard that today in a very compelling way. So we want to thank all of you who do such great work in the areas of housing, certainly to the Secretary, the Mayor, the Speaker, my colleagues, the Governor and Lieutenant Governor, thank you. And thank you as well, I see Joe Finn there, and a lot's been said about Joe. Joe and I go back a long way. He has done incredible work, and his work continues. And the work here continues as well because of the work of John Yaswinski. Not only does he provide what's needed on a day-to-day basis, but he has a vision, and that vision is one step closer to reality today. It's an honor to introduce John Yaswinski. John.
Thank you, Senator Keaton. Governor, Lieutenant Governor, thank you so much for touring the shelter today, meeting with our guests, thanking our staff. You know, I've been at Father Bill's in MainSpring for 24 years, and this year has been the hardest year I've ever had at this mission. But we've been doing it together. So thank you for coming out today and not just making these great announcements, but spending time with our most vulnerable citizens. How did we get here? In 2015, Father Bill's and MainSpring team presented to our board of directors a new model of housing resource center that just isn't a shelter, but it does prevention, it does diversion, it does rapid rehousing, and it builds permanent housing. And I think in 2015, Pastor Wismar, of course, from our board, and Mike Krasanik and the board members left the room and said, are they really going to be able to pull this off? Well, thank you to our board of directors for believing in this vision, believing in best practices, because today those goals are coming true. So thank you. I want to thank our team, April Connolly, Liz Rogers, Katie, and everybody for being the masterminds behind this new best practice model. And then 2017-18, we approached the mayor, we approached the speaker, we approached the Quincy State House delegation and the city councilors. And we say, and thank to our good friend Joe Finn for helping us navigate Quincy. We got the support of this new model from all of our local leaders. The planning department, which is a stellar planning department, helps us shepherd to get $1 million from the Quincy's Affordable Housing Trust Fund for this project. We presented best practices to end homelessness in Quincy, and all of you at the local level gave us the political will needed to get this project funded. So here we are. It's happening. The Lieutenant Governor, the Governor, the Secretary, DHCD, Undersecretary Maddox, Kate, Bronya, Roger from CDAC, Thank you so much for this commitment. And we're hoping that we hear good news about the 30 units of housing this year to go right next to the Housing Resource Center. You know, what we see to build both of these buildings, we're going to also have to raise $7.5 million privately from our supporters and our donors. Well, I'm happy to say today that we've already raised, and we haven't even started the campaign, $3.2 million from the private community. So I guess, Katie, the campaign starts today. What you see, though, from the private donors is what you see here, is the excitement about changing the model, that we will not manage homelessness, we will end it. We recently asked all of our community supporters and donors to describe Father Bill's in 3 words, 3 separate words. The 3 we heard the most was caring, innovative, and a leader. Those 3 words just don't describe our mission and this project. It describes all the speakers here today, all the supporters of this project, the state of Massachusetts, and the great city of Quincy, because you can see we are all in this together. And lastly, to people like Ron, who's known Father Bill forever, Joe Finn, Pastor Wismar, the mayor, Father Bill is looking down from heaven, and he is very happy today. God bless. Thank you.
Questions? Well, first of all, we got some very good news from the federal government yesterday with respect to next week. The first really significant shipments of the 1-dose J&J vaccine will be going out nationwide, and the total amount to be distributed next week is 10 million doses. That's 5 million doses, right, that's a big deal. 5 million doses through the retail pharmacy program, and then another 5 million doses to states. And here in Massachusetts, that'll be definitely north of 100,000 doses of J&J vaccine. And I can't tell you how important that is. And as I've said before, thank God Pfizer and Moderna were there when they were there. But the difference between 2 doses and 1 dose is not just convenience; it's also capacity. If you think about all the people who you can serve with 1 dose and not have to schedule a second dose and take up a second seat at some point later on, it basically doubles the amount of capacity that's available, and in addition to that, the speed with which somebody actually becomes fully vaccinated. 1 dose plus 2 weeks is a lot different than 2 doses plus 6 weeks. And I think for many of us, this is a big sign and a big statement, and we have heard many times that it's coming, This is a big sign that things are actually starting to get here. The second thing I would say is that Massachusetts is a national leader in terms of both how fast we get doses into people's arms and what percentage of our population has been fully vaccinated and how many people have gotten 1 shot. It's going to be up to us, if the federal supply grows, to be able to absorb that and make sure we turn it around and get out, and we'll do everything we can to make sure we do. Yeah, of J&J vaccine here in Massachusetts. Yeah, it's a big deal.
Governor, the CDC list that you developed for the masks are pretty close, but they're not like the CDC list, the Massachusetts list.
I mean, generally speaking, we've adopted the CDC guidelines for our phased enrollment. The only place where we deviated from that was around asthma, and the reason we deviated from that was because asthma, as I think most people know, for many people is an environmental issue. It's due to the circumstances associated with where they live. And many of those places are communities that were disproportionately affected by COVID in the first place, and we felt it was important to incorporate that into our process. But generally speaking, the CDC list and the mass list are pretty consistent on conditions.
But the definitions of some essential workers and things like that don't always line up. Which list do we go on?
Well, I think, look, we have a pretty aggressive approach to vaccinating people overall, and I was thrilled yesterday that the president picked April 19th as the date on which he felt 90% of the population would be eligible, because of course that happens to be the date when everybody in Massachusetts will be eligible, and it's also Patriots Day. But we had a vaccine advisory board that had a lot of people that understand different communities here in Massachusetts, as well as the science associated with the vulnerabilities that people have with regard to COVID. And we've relied on them to be our sort of guidepost for making decisions about this. And in most of the cases, they did follow the CDC rulemaking pretty closely, and in some others, they varied from it. And I think it's important for states, especially given the nature of the rollout and the sensitivity associated with it, to have some folks from communities across your Commonwealth that can represent the voices of people across your Commonwealth to help you make those decisions. And that, for the most part, is where some of the variation against the CDC list came from. So first of all, the Child Advocate report is thorough and hugely distressing, in the sense that it's very clear from reading that report that David Allman's the loss of his life was preventable. And there were a series of systemic breakdowns over a long period of time. The leadership in that office, which had a lot to do with the systemic breakdowns, has been removed. And the DCF folks and DESE and the juvenile court are all involved in discussions about evaluating and implementing the recommendations that were made by the Child Advocate. The issue associated with additional work associated with other cases, that's already been going on pretty much since the OCA first started talking about what was in her recommendations and what her findings were concluding. I didn't hear the last part of that. Look, I think the report itself is incredibly damning of how that whole thing played out, and very thorough, and I expect and anticipate that everything in there is going to get implemented, and it's going to get implemented on a statewide basis, and it's going to get implemented as fast as it possibly can be. I mean, the report speaks for itself in many respects.
Governor, President Biden,
Well, since I don't know what's in the bill, we'll have to wait and see. You've heard me talk about the importance of resilience before, and I know resilience is not exactly on everybody's top 10, maybe even not their top 20 list of things that needs to be dealt with when it comes to infrastructure. But the simple truth of the matter is, we have far more storms than we used to have, and the storms we have are far more severe than they used to be. And much of the infrastructure that exists to deal with those storms, and especially with runoff and bodies of water, not just sea level rises, but bodies of rivers and streams and lakes and all the rest. And we built a ton of infrastructure over the course of the past couple of hundred years that was designed for a different day. And we filed legislation to make it possible for us to invest $1 billion in infrastructure resiliency The legislature has pursued a variety of other approaches. We haven't been able to land on one yet that people can agree on. But I certainly hope that as the federal government moves forward in this conversation about infrastructure and about climate, that they incorporate a pretty significant investment in resiliency as part of that. Resiliency is how you save money in the long run associated with infrastructure. FEMA, the federal agency that's constantly cleaning up and mopping up and reinvesting after hurricanes and tornadoes and floods and polar vortexes and all the other stuff that's been going on for the past few years, will tell you that they spent more money rebuilding certain parts of this country in the past 3 or 4 years than they spent in the previous 20. Now, if we just go ahead and rebuild it exactly as it was, the next time some climate disaster comes through, the same thing is going to happen. And I really do hope that if people are serious about putting together this idea of climate and infrastructure, that there's a big piece in this bill to help us create a resilient infrastructure so that we don't constantly. It's real, it's here, it's obvious. It's a great opportunity for the federal government to work with state and local governments to do things about making our infrastructure, wherever it is, whatever it is, resilient as we deal with all the issues associated with climate going forward. So I hope there's a really big piece. Have I made it clear? I hope there's a really big piece in there to deal with resiliency.
Last question. Whether or not you got your thought after you made your appointment yet, or?
I'm still waiting for my pre-registration to be responded to. But thank you for asking. I appreciate that. Yeah. And I want to again thank John and all the folks here today for this great announcement as part of a much longer series, a much bigger series of initiatives around supportive housing. Lieutenant Governor nailed it on that one. There's a lot of great work going on here and tons more that can be done. Thank you.